So this is vermicomposting, but taking you back to the sad story of agriculture in India, there's also a lot of hope. So in the state of Andhra Pradesh, there's been a silent agricultural revolution going on. In the past 2 to 3 years, we've seen farmers themselves change 1.5 million acres of land into sustainable farming. Now, why have they done it? There have been no subsidies given, there's been no added incentives. All it's been is a sharing of information. Because as a result, so there's been obviously water tables declining, soil degradation from the so-called green revolution, and as a result, their crops have, the quality of crop has been declining, so on and so forth. But so they've now started, using check dams and rainwater irrigation. They've started, using the manure of their cows, which they used to, but then they've moved away from. They've been using sustainable pesticides and all sorts of things. And as a result of sharing this with each other, they've noticed that, they're getting higher yield, they're getting better produce, and it's just good for them. Like, they don't have to rely on chemicals which are very expensive and are also a reason for their debt. Now, for anyone who recognizes this is a jatropha seed. Jatropha is a plant that is used for biofuels. Now, a lot of the debate and contention around biofuels has been around using food crop, but jatropha and pongamia are such plants that that are ideal to be grown on wasteland, barren land that you can't do anything else on. And as a decentralized form of energy, it's excellent for a farming community to be able to use it, or a local community to be able to use it as their form of fuel. And this is obviously solar. Everyone recognizes this as a form of renewable energy. So sometimes when we give presentations, we talk about the fact that I think India's at about 200 and something gigawatts of power at this point. And when you see what it will take, what the government has planned for 2020 is to install about 675 gigawatts of more energy. Now, we can look at this as, oh my God, like India's going to have so much more coal, and there's going to, we're going to have, emissions are going to go through the roof and we'll be done for. Or you can look at it as an opportunity. We have the opportunity to develop correctly, to be installing solar and wind and all sorts of different things. So one of the exciting things that has happened in the past month, I think, is that the Indian government has announced to install 20 gigawatts of solar by 2020, which will take our renewable energy percentage up to 24% of total power, which will be very exciting. But I mean, solar is just one of them. There's also biogas, which is my favorite. India with the largest population of cows, using their cow dung for the purposes of energy production. There's also biomass, using food waste. There's a million things we can do over there. Also, tons of more solutions, but I'm going to cut it short and leave it to this one. And this is just about people awareness. We can do things, top down. We can put in these big projects, but until people don't understand, until people don't change their own actions, we're not going to get the whole way there. It's going to be, there's no one direct solution for it, and not in India, not anywhere. It's going to be the government implementing certain things, it will be business changing their action, and it will be people. And so this is just a picture from one of our climate leadership trainings that we run with young people, where they're just learning about the impacts and the solutions to climate change. So I was asked to briefly talk about Australia's responsibilities, but I won't touch upon it since Frank did. But obviously, obvious ones, reducing emissions. I'm an honest believer of we can't tell other people to do something until we do it ourselves. We need to walk the talk. And with Australia's history of emissions, obviously we need to reduce it. Now, I don't know, how many of you have heard of 350 parts per million as an important number? Okay, cool, most of you. For those of you who haven't, you have different levels of emissions you have different concentrations of carbon dioxide levels that are recommended to stop dangerous climate change. And at the moment, Australia is considering 450 parts per million. Now what that does is that only gives us a 50% chance of avoiding a 2-degree rise, which is seen as the ultimate threshold for dangerous climate change. Now, what I often say is 50% chance isn't good enough. I'm not going to get on a plane if I know there's a 50% chance of crashing. So what a lot of young people around the world are advocating for is 350 parts per million. And a lot of the island nations of the world and the least developing countries of the world are also pushing for 350 parts per million. But what that will mean is that Australia will need to reduce their emissions by about 40 or 45% by 2020 on 1990 levels, which is what these countries are pushing for. Obvious ones, funding and adaptation. Sharing technology, which doesn't mean that we're like shipping our technology over to another country, but just, sharing the information. Opening the doors, which is just, to our neighbours that do end up losing their homes, we should have open arms to embrace them. And ensuring equity. And that just being like, this morning, I was doing an interview with the ABC, and how they announced it was, India, 4th largest polluter of the world, da-da-da-da-da. And that's something that struck me while being back, is India is seen as the 4th largest polluter of the world. And it is. But it also is a country of 1.1 billion people, so has a per capita footprint of 1.2, compared to, say, Australia's 27 tonnes per person or America's 20 tonnes per person. So, as we're coming towards a global solution, we need to keep in mind the struggles of other countries. We need to keep in mind, basic principles of equity, and these principles should not be compromised. So what I'm more excited to talk about is being the change ourselves. And this is, one of my favorite quotes that we use all the time, is that the only way we will change the world and that we will stop climate change is by being the change that we want to see. So I've got lots of different things there, and you see, if you look at history, we've had lots of crises and lots of challenges that have had to be overcome. And I think that all of them have have the same underlying fundamentals that have caused the problems and that will allow for the solutions. Things like greed and selfishness have been the cause for big sources of discrimination, for slavery, and also for climate change through consumption and so on. So, 3 things that I would like you guys to consider, if you already aren't, is firstly starting off with yourself. Thinking of one thing that you would like to take on and change about just your everyday life of what you do. It could be the car that you take, it could be the coffee that you have in plastic and paper packaging. The second one is with your home or your household. It can be anything. It can be a solar panel on the roof, it can be switching to green electricity, it can be composting, it can be, I don't know, you guys can do the creative side of thinking. And then thirdly, in society, take up one thing that you will do for society. And if we can all do one thing in each place, that will be the first step. Now, I would like to talk to you guys about what I'm doing, and I hope that that's somewhat of an inspiration in that I don't only like to tell people what to do, but also like to do things myself. So I've been reading Gandhi's book, and it's absolutely inspiring in that he wanted to be one of the people that he was working for. And so since I've been back to Australia, I've committed to not consuming anything that will give me packaging. So meaning that I have to every morning make sure that I pack all my food, otherwise I'll miss out on a meal. I'm also committing to, at least for the next year, not buying any more clothes and hoping to extend it. And I guess on a bigger scale is what I hope to do is just dedicate my life to the issue of climate change. Like, I've taken time off doing my degree, I'm doing it part-time, and that's my way of committing to something that I think is really important. And you guys don't have to do any of these things to any of that extremity, but I'm sure you guys can find what's important in your life. You may be a mother or a father, you may be a teacher, you may be a business person, I don't know. Thank you, everyone.